This was the darkest hour of Douglas MacArthur's life, and the critical battle that unlocked his speed demon of the Philippines achievement. For a famous, undefeated general to get utterly routed by the Japanese army and sent scurrying like a rat, for a guy as insanely competitive as Dugout Doug, it was an unerasable stain on his golden resume. But you've got to hand it to him. The guy had a flair for the dramatic. Even while running for his life in total embarrassment, he didn't forget to drop the mic with, "You just wait, I shall return." All right, folks, today we're diving into the Philippines campaign. And since we're talking about the Philippines, we have to bring up an old acquaintance, Douglas MacArthur, Dugout Doug. I don't know if it's just me, but there's always a familiar old friend vibe about him. It's pretty wild. Mac was born into absolute military royalty. Back in the day, his dad was the highest-ranking general in the U.S. Army. Like father, like son, right? Dugout Doug completely lived up to the hype, getting into West Point ranked #1 and graduating with the highest score in the Academy's history. He was a legit academic weapon. During World War I, Mac racked up a crazy amount of clout on the Western Front, to the point where General John J. Pershing called him one of the greatest commanders out there. He later became the youngest superintendent in West Point history, and the very next year, he was officially promoted to Brigadier General, making him the youngest general in the U.S. military. Born into the elite and wildly successful at a young age, Mac's early life was almost too easy, and that's exactly what bred his insanely arrogant, invincible God complex. Little did he know, years later in the Korean War, China would use this exact character flaw to set a massive trap for him. Old Mac got completely mentally broken and dropped that iconic quote, "Whoever desires to defeat the Chinese army must do so with God wearing a steel helmet." Logically, MacArthur's future should have been an absolute breeze. But this guy was way too cocky. He didn't even respect President Franklin D. Roosevelt, repeatedly and publicly flaming his administration's policies. On top of that, the rumor mill said Dugout Doug was having a fling with his superior's wife. This scandal blew up, causing massive drama and effectively pumping the brakes on Mac's career. In 1935, after the Philippines gained self-governing Commonwealth status, their first president wanted to bring in a big-name American general to build up the Philippine military from scratch. Coincidentally, MacArthur's dad used to be the Governor General of the Philippines, giving Mac a deep personal connection to the islands. The Philippine president sought out a frustrated, sidelined MacArthur and made his pitch. Maybe it was about reclaiming family glory, or maybe it was just the awkward reality that his career back home was dead in the water. Whatever the reason, MacArthur took the gig, dragged Dwight D. Eisenhower along with him, and headed to the Philippines. From that day on, Dugout Doug lived the absolute high life, second only to the president, and treated like absolute royalty by everyone else. Flash forward to 1941. With the European theater flipped upside down and Asia totally engulfed in war, Japan's ambitions to push south became glaringly obvious. The US woke up and smelled the coffee. Japan was going to make a move on the Philippines sooner or later. They desperately needed a heavy hitter, someone with clout, experience, and local know-how to hold down the fort. Enter MacArthur, a WWII hero, former Army Chief of Staff, holding massive street cred in the military, and with years of turf building in the Philippines. So Dugout Doug was back in the game. On July 26, 1941, Roosevelt officially called MacArthur back to active duty, naming him commander of the U.S. Army forces in the Far East, and bumping him up to full general the very next day. MacArthur was back, baby, the return of the king. Washington's first mission for Dugout Doug: turn the Philippines into the Gibraltar of the Pacific to fend off a Japanese invasion. For a hot minute, Dugout Doug was riding high. He was probably thinking, see, when stuff hits the fan, you gotta call in old Mac. That's professionalism. That's brand reputation. Naturally, at such a clutch moment, how could MacArthur resist putting on a show and flexing for the cameras? True to form, Dugout Doug couldn't wait to hold a press conference where he publicly bragged, "I am the Napoleon of Luzon. If the Japanese dare to come, I'll wipe them off the map with a snap of my fingers." According to Washington's original playbook, MacArthur was supposed to whip 100,000 Philippine reservists into 10 divisions, outfit them with pure American gear, and train them strictly to U.S. military standards. If the Japanese attacked, the plan was to dodge the opening haymaker, immediately abandon the whole island of Luzon, and shrink the main forces down to the Bataan Peninsula. From there, they'd use the terrain to turtle up and hold out for 6 months until backup arrived. The U.S. called this War Plan Orange. MacArthur, however, totally scoffed at it. "I'm a real man who clawed his way out of the WWII meat grinder. Me? Dodge the Japanese? What a joke." Old Mac figured the Philippines is an archipelago. As long as they owned the skies, the Japanese Navy wouldn't even get a sniff of the coastline. Even if a few stragglers managed to slip through and land, they wouldn't be a real threat. He just needed to spot them and squash them, easy peasy. So Dugout Doug vetoed War Plan Orange hard. Instead of pooling his troops and using the terrain to camp for reinforcements, he pivoted to beefing up air power, spreading his troops thin and defending the beaches. The awkward part? Mac was a world-class trash talker, but when it came to execution, it was a hot mess. First off, those 10 planned American-style divisions faced a massive gear shortage. They were missing over 50% of their rifles, machine guns, and artillery. Half the grunts didn't even have a weapon. On top of that, because the clock was ticking, a lot of guys only had a few weeks of basic training and were essentially noobs with zero combat ability. But MacArthur barely sweated it. He doubled down on his bet that Japan wouldn't dare strike the Philippines anytime soon, thinking he had all the time in the world to prep. In his mind, the priority was buffing the Philippine Air Force, so Dugout Doug kept leaning on Washington, demanding B-17 heavy bombers and heavy weapons, eventually finessing 35 B-17 out of them. He bragged that with his heavy bomber squad, he'd have the airspace on lock, and any Japanese fleet trying to pull up would end up at the bottom of the ocean. On December 7, 1941, MacArthur got a frantic memo from Washington. Pearl Harbor just got sneak attacked and wrecked. The next day, the War Department hit him up again, stressing that the Japanese were massing serious troops and planes in Taiwan and were probably coming for the Philippines next. Logically, at this do-or-die moment, MacArthur could have scrambled his 35 heavy bombers to wipe out the Japanese airfields in Taiwan, dispersed his own planes, and gone to DEFCON 1. But Mac stubbornly stuck to his guns. Japan wouldn't hit the Philippines on day one. He swore to his Air Force commander, "Don't sweat it, we're good." He refused to throw the first punch, using the excuse of not wanting to provoke Japan and waiting for Washington to officially declare war. Fun fact, that's exactly what Zhang Shuiliang thought back in the day. And just like that, the golden 9-hour window after Pearl Harbor was totally squandered. All his warplanes were sitting ducks on the tarmac, and his air defenses were basically window dressing. By this time, the Japanese forces had already stacked up 500 warplanes, over 57,000 troops, plus the Third Fleet in Taiwan. Their goal was crystal clear: take the Philippines in record time at any cost, and capture the Emperor alive. At 12:20 p.m. Philippine time on December 8, 1941, literally the day after Pearl Harbor, 108 Japanese bombers and 83 Zero fighters took off from Taiwan, went airborne, and unleashed a massive carpet bombing on the completely caught with their pants down Clark and Iba airfields. In just a few hours, 18 B-17 and 83 P-40 were blown to bits on the ground. Hangars, fuel dumps, and runways were totally trashed. Boom, 70% of the Far East Air Force was vaporized. The air superiority? Gone. MacArthur never in his wildest dreams expected karma to hit him that fast. Panicking, he tried to audible his tactics and switch back to War Plan Orange, but it was way too late. On December 10th, Japanese ground troops hopped on all kinds of landing crafts, split into two prongs, and rushed the Philippines, aiming to land at Lingayen Gulf and Lamon Bay, simultaneously to pincer Manila. That afternoon, Apari and Vigan in northern Luzon fell like dominoes, and over 4,000 Japanese troops successfully rolled into the Philippines. On the 12th, the Kimura detachment of the Japanese 16th Division landed in southern Luzon, and the Japanese 5th Air Group started moving their planes from Taiwan over to the freshly captured airstrips in Luzon. The Japanese basically walked in like they owned the place. The landing was a total cakewalk, with barely any pushback. On the 22nd, the Japanese main force, the 48th Division, landed at Lingayen Gulf. Just when everyone thought it was game over for the Philippines campaign, Japanese commander Masaharu Hama pulled a wild move that actually gave MacArthur a breather. But the real hell on earth was just getting started. After Manila fell, Masaharu Hama, a veteran general who had spent years in the China theater and was an absolute beast at jungle warfare, suddenly had a massive brain fart. He figured that since the Japanese army already had air superiority on lock, the retreating U.S. Philippine forces were just a disorganized mob, not even worth sweating over. He thought a little bit of pressure and a few sweet deals would make them instantly fold and surrender. To him, the most important thing right now was grabbing turf and snatching up all the glory. So wildly enough, the Japanese army straight up gave up on actively chasing them and went off to loot the battlefield instead. To be fair, the U.S. Philippine forces did leave behind a ton of good gear. But thanks to Hama's totally baffling maneuver, the U.S. Philippine army got a tiny sliver of hope. However, even with that break, did the U.S. Philippine forces actually have a shot at a comeback? Hard no. The 70,000 troops who fell back to the Bataan Peninsula didn't just mentally boom from their previous beatdown. On the contrary, having their backs completely against the wall on Bataan triggered their hardcore survival instincts. Using the rugged, mountainous jungle terrain, they built up defenses that practically nerfed the Japanese heavy artillery and air suppression. They stubbornly pinned down the elite Japanese main forces and actually managed to deal massive damage. Even Dugout Doug was shook that his squad of battered, undergeared, and zero-supply remnants could go toe-to-toe with a high-morale, elite Japanese army for 4 solid months. The top brass might have been incompetent, but the sheer grit and absolute dog in those frontline grunts were completely maxed out. Too bad that all the burning willpower in the world couldn't patch the fatal glitches left by upper management decisions. Bataan was cramped, resource-poor, and totally incapable of sustaining an army. The worst part? That backup that was supposed to show up in 6 months? Yeah, that was a total pipe dream. The U.S. Pacific Fleet had already been wiped off the map at Pearl Harbor and had zero capacity for deep water ops. The tens of thousands of defenders on Bataan were staring down a quadruple threat. No ammo, no food, no meds, and definitely no reinforcements. By early 1942, the Bataan defense line was a full-blown disaster zone. Rations were totally zeroed out, leaving guys to munch on wild weeds and tree bark. Ammo was constantly running dry, and all the heavy gear was basically totaled. Medical supplies, non-existent. The death rate for wounded soldiers skyrocketed, and thanks to the brutal Southeast Asian heat, torrential rains, and mosquito swarms, malaria and tropical diseases went absolutely viral. On this hellish strip of land, half the soldiers dropped to Japanese artillery, and the other half got taken out by starvation and sickness. Non-combat casualties completely dwarfed actual battle losses. Even though they were physically and mentally drained and riddled with disease, the frontline troops absolutely refused to break. They stood watch day and night, constantly patching up their broken lines and repeatedly repelled the Japanese army's relentless human wave spam. But man, all the hard carrying by the soldiers couldn't make up for the ultimate game over caused by their commander's massive ego. Facing a shrinking defense line and a constantly dropping player count, MacArthur had to swallow a brutal reality check. Bataan was undefendable, and the fight was basically unwinnable. In February 1942, to save the core command roster for the Pacific Theater, President Roosevelt personally issued a direct order, forcing MacArthur to bounce from the Philippine combat zone. Proud to a fault, MacArthur was eaten up with guilt and frustration. Tens of thousands of his guys were fighting to the death, refusing to back down. Yet as the supreme commander, he had to be the first to dip. Right before he left, looking out at the Bataan Peninsula, maybe to his frontline troops, or maybe to the Japanese, he dropped the most iconic vow of World War II: "I shall return." The boss checked out, leaving the tens of thousands of regular grunts on the front lines with nothing but endless despair and a guaranteed loss. After Mac left, Jonathan Wainwright was put in the hot seat to manage the remnants. In April 1942, to stop his remaining squad from getting completely wiped out in a pointless meat grinder, the surviving 78,000 U.S. and Philippine defenders had no choice but to drop their weapons. Bataan was officially lost. This went down as the biggest, most humiliating mass surrender in the century-long history of the U.S. military. But the tragedy wasn't over yet. Hot on the heels of the surrender came a war crime that shocked the globe: the Bataan Death March. Over 70,000 POWs were forced into a brutal 60-plus mile trek on foot under a blazing sun with zero water or food, enduring constant abuse and slaughter along the way. Any POW who got injured, fell behind, or just ran out of gas was executed right on the spot. In just a few days, over 15,000 POWs were brutally murdered. This atrocity became an unforgettable, permanent scar in U.S. military history. In May 1942, the final U.S. strategic shield, Corregidor Island, fell. With that, the entire Philippines campaign wrapped up, and the U.S. forces were totally steamrolled. The U.S. Southern Pacific Defense Network crashed and burned, letting Japan snatch up all the core strategic drops of oil and rubber in Southeast Asia, completely flipping the script for the entire Pacific War. Rewatching the tape of this whole campaign, the U.S. Army had the high ground, better loot, and the numbers advantage. But in the end, because of Dugout Doug's arrogant, big-headed vibe and his total disrespect for his opponents, his repeated throwing of the game pushed tens of thousands of troops into pure hell. This unforgettable, absolute thrashing left the world with one massive takeaway. A soldier's pure grit can only cover up so many tactical misplays, but a shot caller's arrogance is enough to nuke every advantage and bury an entire army. There's no RNG to save you on the battlefield. Underestimating your opponent is the biggest throw of all. Pride comes before the fall. That's the one ironclad rule of war that never changes.